So my dad calls for his college-age student to come to the hospital and hands me his checkbook and tells me to go to the car dealership and put a down payment on a car that he's never driven. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Welcome back, minions, to another episode of Automisery. It's cold. It's 17 degrees Fahrenheit. The weatherman says it feels like 7 degrees, and I believe it. It's real cold. In 1993, my father had one too many heart attacks. He had bypass surgery, and the doctors told him he had less than a year to live. The only recourse he had was a heart transplant, and he said, oh, I'll take one of those. Unfortunately, the heart transplant, to find a recipient and to go on the heart transplant list sometimes takes longer than a year. So it was a tough time. But after he got on the list, a week later, he received a donor from Kansas City, a young man, a teenager who was a long-distance runner. So my dad got an extremely strong heart, and he got a second lease on life. And so he had a heart transplant, and he was just ecstatic to be alive. So I was going to college at the time, and he summons me to the hotel where, not the hotel, the hospital, sorry. So I was in college at the time, and my dad summoned me to the hospital, and he was so grateful and happy to be alive. He wanted to celebrate, and he wanted to buy a new car. My dad didn't buy new cars very often, and he always liked a certain style. He liked big cars, 2 doors, always had to be a V8. And he handed me his checkbook. So my dad calls for his college-age student to come to the hospital and hands me his checkbook and tells me to go to the car dealership and put a down payment on a car that he's never driven. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of pressure on me, because if the car ends up being a flop, then, you know, I'm going to get blamed for that too. So I went to the Mercury dealer. He wanted a 1994, which would be brand new at the time, Mercury Cougar, a big boulevard car. He wanted the V8, which would be called the XR7, and he wanted a nice riding car, smooth riding car, which it was and still is. And I went to the dealership and told them the story, and they thought it was very unusual for someone to trust their son with their checkbook. And they threw me the keys, and I test drove the car, and I got to thinking about it, and I drove the car to the hospital, ran into the hospital, and called up to my dad's floor, told him to look out the window, went back out and stood next to a car and said, ta-da! And he's on the 4th floor of the tower of the University of Missouri Hospital with his gown closed, give me the thumbs up going, go ahead and buy it. So I went and bought my dad his car, with his money of course, and it was a 1994 Mercury Cougar XR7, which is the V8. And that's this car here. Actually, this is not this car here. It looks identical to this. So it was a maroon car, and this car here is another story. After I graduated from college and was married, I joined the United States Air Force. I needed a car. I had a 2-seater Honda, a 1988 Honda CRX Si, and I had put over 120,000 miles on the car, and the seats were worn out, and I had a spring coming up my butt, and I wanted to get a new car. And I remember back to my dad getting the 1994 Cougar, and I said, that was a very nice car, and I thought maybe I should get that car too. But I couldn't afford the V8 like he did, so I got the 6-cylinder, and I didn't tell him I bought the same car he did. And this was a few years later, so mine was going to be in 1997. I was coming home on leave, and I was going to surprise him. And so I didn't tell him I had got a Cougar just like he had. So I got home here in Missouri. I was stationed in Oklahoma, I believe, at the time. Could have been Florida. And I said, hey, look outside. I said, I have a Cougar just like yours. And he said, no, you don't. I said, well, actually, mine's better than yours because mine's a 97, yours is a 94. And he told me he traded his 94 in for a 97, the same color. And that 1997 car is this one. So I thought I was coming home surprising my dad with a Cougar that looked like his car. And he had already traded his 94 in for this 97. And was keeping that a secret because he wanted to let me know. He didn't want me to be upset since I helped him buy the first car, but it was funny because we tried to surprise each other. So now we both are driving 1997 Cougars, even though mine's a 6-cylinder because I couldn't afford the V8, and his was the XR7. In 2008, my dad was extremely ill, and the United States Air Force was going to ship me from Japan back here to Missouri to take care of my dad. On the flight back, my dad passed away. At the funeral, my sister inherited this car, and the car had sat around outside for a year before she got it, and so the tires were a little weather checked, and so the car probably needed a little bit of help when my sister got it back in 2008. Fast forward to 2018, my sister passed away, and I went to Kansas City to go get this car, and I hadn't seen it since my dad's funeral in 10 years. And like I said, when I saw it then, it had sat outside for a year. So I wasn't expecting too much. I went and checked out the Blue Book value for this car. It was like $850, but because this was a low mileage car, it could be worth as much as $1,000, which everyone knows is nothing in this day and age. But when I got to Kansas City to pick up the car that I inherited from my sister, I was shocked that the car was in such good condition. It has a little bit of hail damage, brand new tires. My sister's boyfriend had just taken it to the shop to get an oil change for me, which is extremely nice of him to do so. And the interior of the car is great. There's a couple of flaws, being as old as the car is, but the car also had 84,000 miles. It was like 84000, and it was like, that was amazing. I was amazed. 1997, and here we are in 2018, and driving and riding in that car gave me instant memories of my father, and also the car I had, which was a 97 Cougar as well. I've always liked maroon cars, and every time I try to get a maroon or red one, I don't seem to do so well. I've got the Porsche 928 red, which is like my first red car ever, but this is a beautiful car. I'm kind of on the shadow side. That's the way you get the nice lake view. Let's go on the sunny side. So it's a beautiful car. My dad used to have an Impala Super Sport, and then he went to bigger cars. He had a Chrysler Newport, and then he had a Ford LTD with a 400. And then he had a very ugly 1980 Thunderbird, a little boxy thing that I locked the keys in at my grandparents' house. He's like, we're on a farm at your grandparents' house. Why would you lock the door? I don't know, Dad. I was in high school at the time. But this is a beautiful car. This is basically the same car as the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird has a sloped back window, and my dad and I kind of like the notchback better. The earlier versions had a reversed 3/4 panel window that was ugly, so we waited until they got better. You can tell this is the XR7 because it's got the spoiler and the badging. XR7, which is the V8. Inside, there's a couple of issues, and I'm working on it today. That's why the fuse box is down here. So, it's got 84,306 miles on it, so I've put only 300 miles on it since my sister passed away. I love all the dials and the gauges. It's got a tachometer. Everything works. Everything works in here. Windows, power door locks. There's a couple of things. The shifter Well, let's go through the dash again. So I like the actual dials. It's easy to use. It's got an actual cassette player from that era. I know, like in Doug DeMuro videos, he fusses about not having a knob for the radio, and so he says, "Who wants to go push, 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 push on these older radios?" And I just want to strangle him. I'm like, "Why don't you just put your finger down and hold it? It'll scroll up on the volume." So I also know he fusses about old cars that have a dimmer switch and a bright light switch on the floor. He goes, "Who would do such a thing? That's just silly." And so sometimes Doug, being Doug Young, he doesn't know any better, but this car got everything. It's got cruise control. It's got airbags on both sides. Headliner is beautiful. Leather seats everywhere. It's nice. This is a boulevard car. I used to work at a car dealership when I was in high school, detailing cars, and it was a Chrysler dealership, but they had some really floaty boat types of cars, like a New Yorker. This does not ride as smooth as a New Yorker or a top-of-the-line Cadillac, but it's not far behind. It's maybe a half step behind that. It's definitely not a sports car. It's just extremely comfortable. My dad loved it because it had these two giant doors, which made it look sporty, but that was also a flaw in the car as well. Let me go over the shift knob before we talk about the door issue. So back in this era, I guess little old ladies were stepping on the gas pedal, shifting the car into drive and running people over. So they had a recall to put in a safety switch. You must push the brake pedal to shift this car out of gear into other gears, and that switch sometimes goes bad. So when I was trying to get the car out of the barn today, and this has done it a couple times before, it wouldn't come out of park. And so everyone says it's that bad. One, it could be a fuse, or two, it could be that little switch from that recall era where you must push down on the gas pedal. Well, I had the car warming up in there, and I was coming back and get the video camera, and the car warmed up, and then it's worked again. So it worked enough to get me out of there. So obviously it's not a fuse, and the switch can't be a bad switch because it's working now. So it's working intermittently. Eventually I'm going to get stuck somewhere where I can't pull this back out of drive. A couple of the cars for this era has a hole over here. You stick a key or a screwdriver in the hole and it releases this. This car does not have that, so that's an issue. But power seats, really comfortable, what we call a boulevard car. The steering wheel's a little rough, and it had a steering wheel pad on it because some people don't like to feel this. There's another YouTuber out there called Chris Fix, and he has a video on how to fix this to make it look brand spanking new. And I'll eventually get around to trying to fix this steering wheel to make it look like the day it came out of the factory. So I trust other YouTubers to teach me how to do things too. All right, a couple of things with this car. These doors are so big and so long that what makes the car look sleek and not have this big ginormous car. It's a full-size car. Have a four-door, which my dad didn't like. Having the big two doors that make it look better also has some issues. The doors are so heavy that when they close, they hit up here, and it makes a small little hole right here. Vehicles were doing that on the showroom floor. Now, I bought my car later in the year, so my dad has this issue where his car, when you close the door, it squishes on this weather stripping enough where the corner of the door here, right here, would hit in here and go right through the paint. Well, my car I bought a little later in the year, and they knew about that problem, so they took vinyl tape and just put a piece of tape there to protect it. And I'm like, that's a Ford Mercury solution for a problem. But you can see having these big doors makes the car a little more sporty looking, streamlined. So other than that switch and the steering wheel that needs to be reconditioned, there's Oh, the sun is kind of bubbled up this trim piece, and there's a missing section there. And that's all the way around the car. I think the headlights are a little yellowed out. And then there's some, a little bit of hail damage. I don't know if you can see that right through there. Oh, there's a good one right here on the door frame, right there. So it's got a little bit of hail damage, but it's my dad's car. I mean, I took it to the McKnight tire, and we had a few things done. I know the brakes, the rotors needed to be changed, and they did. And let's see if I can find the keys real quick. I love these full-size cars from this era because you got a ginormous trunk. I mean, come on. You don't get cars with this kind of space in them much anymore. And my sister took real good care of this. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted and shocked. The engine let's see if I can remember which side this is on. Try to do this one-handed. Sorry, guys. There it is. Or not. There we go. A little dirty. It's a 4.6 liter V8. Sometimes you think V8s and you think giant horsepower. Well, over the V6, yes. But this car, I think, just barely has around 200 or so. It's real close. But it's a real good motor. This is the same motor that was used in Police Interceptor Crown Victorias from the era as well. And so they're some pretty good motors. Now, when you see a giant car like this with a motor that only has maybe 200 horsepower, you go, well, it's not going to be very fast. And like I said, this is not a sports car. This is a boulevard cruising car. I own 5 vehicles, and this one is the nicest riding one out of all of them. I have a 2017 Toyota, and so to remind myself to go through all the cars and to use them, because when cars sit, they don't do real well. I take this car to church. I take my kids to church in it every Sunday, and that's about the only time I use it now. But that's to remind me to at least run it once a week. What was I going to talk about that motor? That motor being 4.6 liter. There's something else I was going to tell you about. I can't remember. But I don't know if we can start this bad boy up. All right, this is my dad's 1997 Mercury Cougar in the snow. So a lot of times people see a full-size car like this and they think it's really heavy, and it is heavy, but not as heavy as I thought. So I'm looking up the numbers on this car, and depending upon what year you buy, it's either 3,500 pounds or 3,600 pounds, which sounds like a lot. But I have a 2-seater Porsche Cayman sports car, which they're always looking to minimize weight, and it weighs 2,900 pounds. So you're talking this car here, a giant full-size American car, V8 with these giant heavy doors, which are extremely difficult to get out of, by the way, because they're so large. When you're parked next to another car, you can't open them all the way to get out. So they're kind of a pain. But this car is what, 3,500 pounds? That's not super heavy. So you don't really need a ginormous V8 motor in a cruising type of car. But it's really a nice riding car. The seats are so nice. This is like the nicest seats of any car I've ever driven in. If you go cross country, I told you, my father passed away and the car went to my sister, and my sister passed away and I got the car. Well, before those two folks passed away, I had another sister and she died, and I drove my dad in this car all the way to Newport News, Virginia, from here in Missouri. was a long trip to go to a funeral, but this car all the way from Missouri to Virginia, which is a lot of miles, was extremely comfortable. Getting off this gravel road finally onto pavement. 84,000 miles. Like I said, this car isn't worth much. It's worth $1,000, but to me, it's worth a lot more. The couple of things that were wrong with it when I got it was the brake rotors were bad, and you know, those and a few other items was, I think the bill was $1,700 for a car that's worth maybe $800 to $1,000. But I started watching other YouTubers like Tyler Hoover and some other folks who have a whole fleet of cars, and you know, Tyler Hoover really got me thinking, since he has like 40 cars, and I understand they make a lot more money, and they're really established YouTubers who have like 500,000 subscribers, and I have what, 40? And so I'm not making any money off of YouTube, and I just don't have the funds to have a fleet of 40. But you know, I was thinking, why can't I have a fleet of like a handful of cars? Right now I have 5, and I didn't mean to have that many. I was trying to work a deal for 2 different cars, 2 different Porsches, and ended up making the deal for, you know, I was going to play one deal against the other. I was looking at the 928 and I was looking at the Cayman, and I was making deals with different people at the same time, and I was going to see which one was better. And both deals were so good that I ended up buying 2 of them, and I really didn't need 2 Porsches. And then I have my daily driver, which you haven't seen yet. You maybe have peeked at it in the garage in a previous video. And then I have everyone out here has a farm truck. I got that, and that's it. And then this car was inherited because of my sister's passing. So that's the entire fleet pretty much. I have a motorcycle as well, and I'm like, that's not, I mean, that's a lot more insurance too, but that's not a crazy fleet of 40. Sorry, Tyler. So but I am having fun doing the YouTube thing and learning how to edit videos, and learning how to say Porsche, which I'm still having a hard time with, because I'm sorry about that. I own 2 of them, but it's just hard to say Porsche. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm in America, in Missouri. I mean, the name of my channel here is Automisery. It's a play on words because of mispronunciation of Missouri. So that's just funny. So we're gonna come up here. We're on a side road here. I don't know why I took that, because there's still some ice on it. We're gonna get back on the highway, head back to my house, but we'll open her up. I mean, she's really got, it's awesome. Yeah, she's not a sports car. I think 0 to 60 is 8.0 on this, which, I mean, that's 3,500 pound car going 0 to 60 to 8. 8 used to be quick. Like I said, my Honda CRX Si 1988, everyone thought it was quick. They said, oh my gosh, this is a very peppy car. And that was what I sold to get my 1997 Cougar. And the Honda CRX Si was 0 to 60 in 8.2 seconds. So this car here is actually faster than my 2-seater little Honda. But nowadays, 8 seconds is considered quite slow. And let's see if we can get a little pick me up here. I like this car. I like this car a lot. Dad's car, and if you like the content of my show, Minions, please like, subscribe, share, and
loves company, and we'll see you next time. Bye.